I swapped my earbuds because I think the other ones were just not working, and I think
Hmm.
possibly the reason is that they have little cat tooth marks in the wire. I don't feel like I'm in podcast mode as much without the big headphones on my head. So
It's very essential to have, big poofy headphones if you're going to be podcasting. I mean, yeah, that's just part of the whole deal.
yes, I already don't have my microphone on camera. What do I do without the
What, yeah, what are you doing? It's like you're just on a normal Zoom call.
Hello and welcome to the Fast and Broken podcast, where we take a critical look at the fast-moving world of tech and online culture. I'm Carly Rector, a software engineer and startup founder who still does a lot of software engineering, theoretically, but mostly it's AI these days. So we will talk some about that today.
Yeah. And I'm Teresa Kramer. I'm a now professional voice actor and MBA student who's doing more voice work these days, which is really exciting and fun for me. But yeah, always happy to talk about all things tech and AI and what have you.
So our topics today, we will be talking first a little bit about the announcements from YouTube from their recent Made on YouTube event for new product features, especially because that's relevant to this podcast. Give a little peek behind the curtain on some of our production stuff too, because I think that's interesting. And then we have a couple of AI segments again that are broader ones that we alluded to last week a little bit. One where we will talk about some studies on productivity and time savings with AI and sort of like the success of AI pilots, a couple different things there. And then we will talk about the humanities, AI and humanities education, which is a slightly different thing from the more uh, technical and corporate aspects of it.
Hmm.
So we'll hit the whole range, hopefully. So we can start with the YouTube ones. I guess first, a little context. We are publishing this podcast on all platforms, but it is doing dramatically best on YouTube. So you're probably listening on YouTube, which is interesting because that was not what I expected at all. And I haven't done any particularly like different promotion for YouTube, other than that I post shorts on YouTube, which has helped some. But YouTube is like 80% of our podcast streams at the moment. So versus Apple Podcasts and Spotify, which are less.
It's really, yeah, not
Um,
what I would expect,
yeah, and some on Substack, which is separate, because I have to do that separately.
Mhm.
But yeah, they did mention in their YouTube event, there's a lot of podcast growth on YouTube, and that's also sort of like why Spotify is getting more into video podcasts because they're competing in that space.
Mhm.
But apparently, YouTube users as of July 2025 now consume over 100 million hours of podcasts daily. So they had a bunch of product announcements at this event, not all of which were podcast related. One of them that I thought was related to us particularly is they will automatically create interesting clips and shorts out of your longer
Mm.
podcasts that, and they will also create video for audio only podcasts. I don't know what
Hmm.
video, unclear. That part's not out until I think next year, but just so you can upload something that is audio only to YouTube as
Yeah.
a podcast also. It is also interesting because we use Riverside for podcast production, and they have some of these features already. They have auto-generated shorts and clips and stuff like that, which I have kind of used. They're not very good. Mostly I've still been making them myself, and it's still useful to do because like Riverside makes
Yeah.
it super easy to just like quickly swap the aspect ratio and like change the crop if you need to in the different aspect ratio and just like reorganize the raw material you have for your podcast. And that's helpful. But the AI features that they have, I have not yet found helpful.
We were having that problem too, like peek behind the curtain again, like where Riverside's audio editing was also just like you could identify like where the ums and ahs and the weird pauses were taking place, but like in the process of doing so, it was like clipping out other words and winding up with this weird, just sort of like kind of like
Yep.
speaking pattern, which is really unpleasant to listen to. So
Yes. Riverside is definitely a split between features that are incredibly useful, like it does auto transcription, and then you can do text-based editing of the podcast. So you can just go in and just like delete whole sections, and it automatically edits the audio video part of it for you, just based on you editing the text. And it also will auto remove pauses and theoretically ums and ahs and other sort of like filler words or gaps.
mhm.
Um, and I made more heavy use of that one in the first few episodes, but yeah, it's especially the filler words thing is inconsistent and tends to
Mhm.
hit bits of other words sometimes. And I think again, YouTube's going to try and compete in that space with some of these too.
Which makes sense. Yeah.
Um, yeah, And especially with the making it easier to make the shorts, because that is,
Hmm.
as we talked about, and is the only reason why we're recording video. The main reason, one of the main ways to promote your podcast is to do like short 1 to 2 minute clips and put them on TikTok or YouTube Shorts, apparently,
Yeah.
which I have been doing and have been doing reasonably well. So
Yeah. And I can see how YouTube would be like well equipped in that regard too, because they already have like the whole like, oh yeah, this is the part of the video or podcast that people are listen to the most or like are re-listening to the most. And so it's like, ah yeah, obviously you'd want to like clip that most interesting section of it to sort of like draw people in. And so
once you have the listening data, yeah, that's
yeah,
perhaps less helpful than putting it up immediately when you get it up, because you would have to have it up for a while and get some
it's true.
behavior
Yeah,
before
yeah.
you get it. But yeah, since they already have just like drop off times and like the retention things that you can see in your YouTube analytics, um, they could
Hmm.
probably pick those spots out easier
Yeah, yeah.
than someone who doesn't have that kind of consumption data,
Yeah,
which
definitely.
we'll see how they do with that. I still don't know how they'll do it, the getting a self-contained clip part, which is a little bit interesting, because that's the main thing that I found Riverside does bad at, where it's just like, here's an interesting spot, but like, how much of the content before and after that do you need to make it make sense?
Right,
And
right.
even the ones where it says selected what I think is correctly an interesting topic, I definitely have to go in and just like edit and get more context for it to make
People
any
need these
sense.
things to understand it. Yeah, yeah. No.
Yeah, and like have the first few sentences be something that is grabby and lets you know what it's talking about, and a bunch of stuff that it feels like it's less good at, which is interesting.
Makes sense.
Um,
Yeah. I feel like I'm interested to see like what they would do with like yeah like podcasts that do not have a visual because like I've seen some very fun like word art essentially like
mhm.
you know like lyric music videos is kind of what
Yeah,
I'm
I was gonna say
thinking
lyric
of.
videos or things like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, where it's just like it's just words but it's really fun words on the screen. And it's like and I feel like if it's something like that I'm not so much like opposed to it because like that feels like it requires less you know um usage of artists' assets and stuff like that. But if it's like, oh no, we're going to like, AI generate little clip art or something like that to kind of go in
yeah,
your video, I feel less cool the more that you are including like actual drawings and things like that. Whereas yeah, like just like a little lyric video type thing, I think that could
yeah.
be pretty neat.
Lyric video or like Winamp visualizer, something like that.
Yeah, yeah. Bring back the Winamp visualizer.
Yes, because like if the problem they're solving here is just like people don't have video for their podcasts and therefore they can't
Hmm,
upload them at
hmm.
all, then like literally anything is fine.
Yeah, yeah.
So
The weird little like what is it, the old Windows screensavers where it was
yes,
just like a blob of color moving around the screen.
yeah. Probably
Gosh.
they will want to do something a little fancier than that, because they could just do
Probably.
that part right now, and they're not launching this till AI powered next year or whatever, I think. So
Yeah,
we'll
yeah,
we'll
yeah.
see what they
We'll
come
see
out with
what it
there,
looks
but
like. Yep.
it'll be interesting to see, and maybe
Yes.
whatever it is will be cooler and more interesting to look at than our faces. Who knows?
Who
Um,
knows? Who knows? Yeah, maybe people who do have videos would be like, "Oh, I'm doing that instead." But I do feel like the faces probably will never go away, just in terms of like the relatability aspect of it. Like, was it you're gonna get like more engagement if you have a face on there? And it's like I do believe that's very true. That having a
yes,
human face does drive engagement.
yep, yes. To some of our discussion points before, like people care about
People.
personality and
Yeah.
stuff like that, and even more so as more and more AI content
Hmm.
becomes a thing. We didn't get away from AI there. They did have some announcements that were not about AI. Some of the other ones, this is probably not as interesting for people who are not into the online creator space, but one of the things that they did was uh, you're going to be able to have dynamic sponsored slots, such
Hmm.
that it's not just HelloFresh is there forever, even after HelloFresh stopped paying you. You can actually like swap out that in your old content.
No, that'd be
Um,
fun. Yeah.
yeah, which I think helps creators a lot, because
Hmm.
then you can sell it again. You don't, for example, have to have a honey promo in all of your old videos for forever after that has become an extremely
Yep.
questionable thing to have in your video, or like
Yep.
any of that kind of stuff. Because mostly right now, you cannot edit YouTube videos. Or I think you can like cut things from it, but you cannot add
Yeah.
things back or something like
Yeah,
that.
because I remember seeing the whole oh gosh, what was it? Spiffing Brit, who is a YouTuber, a video game YouTuber, had done a video where he had originally a very long video and then cut it in half to try and see if like
Yeah,
it would mess with YouTube's like percentage view metrics and things like that, which is very
yeah,
interesting. But yeah, I think he was only cutting it there. He wasn't like replacing it with a new video.
yeah. I think I saw that one too, and I thought it was super interesting because it's like
Yeah.
if you make a very long video and it gets a whole bunch of views, and then you cut it in half, you're changing the denominator of your view metrics, and does that change it? And how does that do? And I don't actually know what the results of that
Yeah,
experiment
so like
were, but
the results on that one, it was actually like unfortunate for him. The results were like that was the best performing video on his channel, but I think he supposes that it was less to do with the like cutting the length and more that like it kind of went viral before the length was even cut, and a lot of people were like, "Oh, that's very interesting. Like, let's see what's going
it
on
is
here."
very interesting.
But yeah, that kind of thing is like they were just cutting content from the video and not replacing it wholesale with something different.
Yep. Yeah. So this is the feature coming soon, which will allow you to at least have swappable sponsored segments,
Hmm.
so that you can take that out or replace it with new sponsorships if you want to just like
Yeah.
have a currently active sponsor that is on all of your videos rather than this is a sponsor of one video and then they're there forever.
And I feel like
Which
that also
plus,
like opens up more opportunities because it's like, oh hey, like here's my best performing video that still gets like
mhm,
X number of views every month, and you can kind of like then sell that to sponsors
yep,
essentially.
yeah, they mentioned specifically you can resell the slot
Yeah,
on things
yeah.
like that. So that
Which
brings it closer to a lot of other media, like
mhm,
Spotify ads work that way, obviously, where they're dynamic
yeah.
ads
Yeah.
based on etc. Or like television.
Or billboards even. Like, yeah, it's very odd to have like this sort of canonical, like this is the ad, this will always be the ad, and the ad shall never change kind of thing that happens on YouTube.
Yeah. So that's changing, which I thought was interesting. They also quoted a thing as part of this that they have paid more than $100 billion out to creators, artists, and media companies in the last 4 years. So
Hmm.
I did some research for another thing about how much creators are getting paid from platforms, and YouTube is definitely one of the biggest ones, and
Hmm.
talks a lot about how many tens of billions of dollars they're adding to the US GDP, which is a lot because it is like there are a
Yeah,
lot of people making money on YouTube, and it's not just individual creators, it is whole production companies in some cases.
yeah.
And that's not very well measured. This is a whole separate topic we could go into at some point, but like because of the categorization of job types that exist,
Mm.
for like government surveys and stuff like that does not include online content creator for
Really,
some
it
reason.
should. It really should,
It
honestly.
should, yes, but it does not include that because it hasn't been updated in decades, and
Yeah.
therefore that is not measured as a separate thing to know how much
Hmm.
it's the economy it is. And the answer is a lot, but
Yeah.
it's not measured very well. So yeah, YouTube likes to give out a bunch like stats on that, on how much they're
Hmm.
supporting small creators and small businesses.
I mean, that's good. It's good for them to remember kind of like who is making the platform interesting.
Yeah, let's segue to AI productivity. So we have a couple different studies in here from the last couple months to talk about. One is a study specifically around software developers that found that despite expectations of both people in general and the people who were studied specifically, using AI tools for coding tasks slowed them down versus the baseline instead of speeding them up, um, by about 19%, which is interesting. I will, before we get too deep into this, baseline a little bit on where I'm coming from here, which is I'm a software developer. I use AI tools basically constantly. I've been using them for my job almost 40 hours a week for like the past 9 months, and it 100% makes me way, way faster. Caveat, I'm a very specific case, which is I'm a very senior developer and I'm working in startups where I basically am trying to get together working prototypes as fast as possible,
Yeah.
which is the best place to be using. Well, one of the best places to be using AI. I think there's a couple others which we could talk about, but
Hmm.
it works very well for generating new code. And therefore, I can build something from scratch in days that would have previously taken me or like a whole team of developers
Hmm.
weeks to months. Like that is a factually thing that I've been able to do. So, um, my takeaway from this study is not AI doesn't help people, but that it's not like a magic bullet. And there's some
Yeah.
specific places that it's useful and perhaps specific people that it is useful for. So some other things about the study specifically, it was only for 16 engineers across 200 some different tasks. And of the 16 engineers, some of them did see a speed up.
Hmm.
And we have a Twitter X thread here from the one who basically got the most speed up, talking about his thoughts on it, which are very similar to mine, honestly.
I did actually find a blog article from one of the other developers who saw a slowdown on his side. So it's very interesting to have like competing developer perspectives on sort of like how the study progressed. Also, one of the observations from get this person's name. I think it was Philip Burkhart, who was one of the other guys in the study, was along the lines of like, yeah, like it was only 16 engineers, but like due to the design of the study, because they were essentially testing the engineers against themselves, it essentially zeroes out a lot of the noise in the statistical data, because you're not saying it's like, oh, well, this engineer was faster, this engineer was slower. Well, maybe they have different typing speeds, maybe they have different levels of expertise and things like that. It's like that was not the case in this study because they were measuring the engineers against themselves,
That makes
which
sense.
is really
And
interesting.
yeah, and I think, yeah, I don't know if counter argument's even the right word. I believe that AI did actually slow most of the people in this study down. Like, I believe that
Yeah.
that is true, and that is a
Hmm.
statistically significant result. One of the things that I think about a lot is that there's a particular skill that it takes to use AI coding tools that I don't actually think correlates very well with skill at engineering not using AI coding tools.
Mm.
Um, because what you really need to do is both have a vision for what you want it to do at a technical thing and communicate it clearly, which communicating clearly is not something that engineers are generally trained to do.
Yeah.
As a rule. And it's also just like a different way of thinking about it, especially if you're a relatively junior dev. And they said, I think they had an average of like 5 years experience in that study, which is not
Hmm.
junior. That's sort of a mid-level engineer.
Yeah.
Um, but in my experience, the way that coding tools work the best is if you are already used to working at the level of thinking at architecture and you're
Hmm.
not even actually writing code that much. Like principal level engineers often do not write code. They like write architecture documents and then they have more junior
Hmm.
engineers actually do the implementation because it's not actually the best use of their time to be physically sitting there and typing the code. So
Hmm.
they basically come up with the plan, the schematics for how the implementation goes, and then they describe it clearly enough that someone else could then go implement it.
Hmm.
And that's the skill that applies really well to using AI coding tools because then you just have the AI do that and you don't need anyone else to do it.
Yeah. Like the engineer who I was just talking about commented that the process was like the digital equivalent of shoulder surfing an overconfident junior developer. In his description of it, like he hadn't used specifically cursor type AI agents in coding. He had been using a lot of other AI tools, but not specifically like cursor, or I think Claude Code is the one that he mentioned specifically. But like that it was like, oh yeah, like you do kind of have to just change how you are approaching it. It's like
Yeah,
it's more
it
like a
is.
delegation thing. And
Yeah, it is a completely different method of working, which is what
mhm,
I think is the most interesting thing about it. And it's like I like it because that's kind of
mhm,
like the direction that I wanted to go working anyway, which is like I don't actually care about sitting down and writing my for loops or whatever. Like that's not the interesting part of it for me. It's how does it conceptually come together and what
mhm,
pieces need to be in place to accomplish the goal that you're trying to do from an end user perspective,
yeah,
basically. And how do you fit the puzzle pieces together that way? And
mhm,
in a lot of ways, I find it faster than delegating to, I mean, obviously it's faster than delegating to human developers, but it's faster
mhm,
even from my perspective because I don't even have to write as clearly if I was writing up a Jira issue or something for a
mhm,
junior
mhm,
developer. I would have to go into a lot more detail because they don't understand all of the concepts that I have in the back of my head. Whereas
yeah,
if I'm talking to an AI agent, I can actually just kind of like vaguely gesture in the direction of what I think it should be doing. And because it knows all the concepts already and better than me in a lot of cases, it will figure it out most of the time,
Mhm.
at least like 80 to 90% of the time, which is the other part of it is being able to tell when it's doing something that is wildly wrong, which just earlier today I was wrestling with Claude about being like, what are you doing? Why don't do that? Do this instead. So like I still have to do that relatively frequently, which is also an important part of it. But like even
Yeah.
given all of that, I think it's way more efficient.
Yeah.
But like I was saying, and like this other person was saying, it's a totally different method of working.
Mhm.
Oh, the other caveat that I didn't give up front to why this works especially well for me, in addition to I'm very senior, I've been writing code for 18 years or whatever, and I'm working on startups, is I'm working alone, which is also a big
Yeah.
one. Because I don't think anyone has figured out really how to use AI in the context of an existing software engineering team. And like, how does that fit into the
Mhm.
processes that we already have in terms of like code reviews and how much people are actually working on the code? Do AI coding tools just make people just code reviewers? Because code reviews already were a substantial chunk of time in a big industry software engineering workflow because you have to
Mhm.
review other people's code, and that takes a significant amount of time to understand it. And now that is more time than it takes to actually write the code because the AI is generating the code.
Yeah.
Um, so it's like, but also there's also a lot of like discourse about like, is having a human person read through the code the best way to guarantee anything about the code? Like, it's definitely not a way to guarantee correctness. That's a terrible way to do that. When you're reviewing it, you can review it at like sort of a higher level to see if like the strategy is right and the design is right. But ideally, you're
Mhm.
doing that before the code is written. Um, and in terms of correctness standpoint, it's
Yeah.
like does it compile, write some tests, see if it performs correctly, that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of questions around I think what the new software engineering workflow looks like when
Mhm.
AI can actually make most of the code.
I think what is it like the Atlantic article that I mentioned was also talking about how we're kind of in the productivity J curve of AI, especially for developing.
Disillusionment, trough of
Drop
disillusionment.
of disillusionment. Yes, exactly that. Right. What is it? The article was showing that like for 300 per publicly disclosed AI initiatives, 95% of the projects failed to deliver any improvement to
Yep.
profits for the companies that they were in, and it's like,
Yeah, that's a
yeah,
SNIPS article that we have on here is that
yeah, yeah,
study. Yeah, which we can move on to because that's broader than just the software engineering side. That
yeah,
is
yeah.
an MIT report on just AI
Mhm,
and business generally. Um,
mhm.
and yeah, 95% fail. What they say is like about 5% achieve rapid revenue acceleration. The vast majority stall, delivering little to no measurable impact on P&L.
Yeah. And and like I would say like reading that statistic just like from like a project management perspective, it's like weirdly not as harrowing as you would think, because it's like you do assume that a majority of projects are going to fail. Like I had a mentor at Amazon who taught me a lot of what I know about project management, and one of the things that he emphasized at like early and often was like that actually like yeah, projects are going to fail, and you will have to just get used to your project failing and learn how to take the learnings from what has failed and apply it to the next thing that you're doing.
Yeah, and there's definitely a lot of interesting stats if you go a little deeper on that around like
Mhm.
which ones work and which ones don't. This Fortune article has a quote that says, purchasing AI tools from specialized vendors and building partnerships succeed about 67% of the time, while internal builds succeed only one-third as often, which I think that's counting success as something different in that case,
Yeah.
um, but I think that's true. And then there's also the sort of like top-down versus bottom-up question, which is I think a pretty dramatic one in the AI space, which is like the CEO coming in and saying everyone has to use AI now
Mhm.
basically never works because A, people don't
Yeah.
want to. B, the CEO does not understand which tasks the rank and file
Mhm.
people are doing that actually can be helped by AI, and therefore they will bring in something that is flashy, but maybe not actually helping them in any way. Versus bottom up people who are finding a way to use AI in their own individual workflows tends to work better.
Yeah.
And I think the challenge that people have said there is like, how do you then transition? This is a good individual productivity tool to this is something that can be used between the overall all organization in a useful way.
Mhm.
And I
And
think
I feel like that's a non-unique problem to AI, really.
yes,
Like that
yeah,
happens across the board.
Yep, that's true. And I was Microsoft just actually did some announcements that they're going to try and make AI more of a quote team sport
Mm-hmm.
by bringing it into more of their collaboration tools. Um, and I think the
Mm-hmm.
other interesting one from that survey is that there's a lot of focus on AI for marketing type stuff,
Mm-hmm.
like content generation, especially because that's sort of like, especially people who are not deeply technical, what they think of it as doing is like it's a text generator. It can generate text. It can like write our blog posts or whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's actually where it's most useful. I think,
Nope.
and that's not where people saw most improvement. Where it does usually offer the most benefit is back office operational stuff,
Mm-hmm.
um, which aligns with my intuition there too, which is like there's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff in the operation of a company that is basically just data entry or translating something from one format to another, whether that's just like reading some articles and then writing a document, or like you literally have a form that you have to type things into and you have to get that information from somewhere else and put it in there. And
Yeah.
just like anything that is basically at a fundamental level just moving information around can be done way better and more efficiently by AI, and probably should, because that's not anything that
Yeah.
anyone wants to be spending their time on, I don't
No.
think.
I mean, like, data entry can be very soothing sometimes, but yeah, like, it is something that's a very, very strong use case. It kind of harkens to the conversation about, like, where AI is helpful and where you need like a senior developer to be involved in coding projects. It's something Burkhardt mentioned in his article was like, hey, like if you're a senior developer and you're trying to code this, one of the advantages is that you have kind of a holistic mental image of how all the different pieces fit together. And similarly, in a creative pursuit, you have an inherent knowledge of the key selling points of the product, or the kind of wording or images or what have you that resonates with people, that will appeal and resonate with your customer base. And so it's like you don't want AI doing those tasks that need that like human touch
Mhm.
or that like holistic image of a field of expertise.
Yeah.
Whereas like, yeah, like if you need somebody to like move your invoices or honestly, like, you want to talk about a career that I think AI is threatening? Accounting. Like, I've been taking accounting classes for my MBA, and it is so much just this number needs to be coded here, 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 and here, and these things need to balance out here. And it's like, yes, there's an expertise that goes into it, but that expertise is by and large like logical. And so yeah, so I think the operational efficacy of AI, I think, is like something that everybody wants it to be like, oh, so flashy and showy. And no, just have it do the
Yeah.
grunt work, you know?
Yeah. And like there's a line of argument people will make where they're like, well, yeah, it can't replace the senior developer yet, or it can't replace the marketer who's really good at their insights yet, but it will eventually. And I don't think that's true, because
No.
it's not about whether the AI can physically do the tasks that they're doing
Hmm.
exactly. There's a level of interpretation that is necessary where the information to do it is not available to the AI because it doesn't really exist except in like a
Hmm.
concept of what people want out of it. Like when you're doing a marketing campaign, there's not really like a wrong answer for the
Hmm.
AI, but there is a strategy that you have as a company, or something that you're trying to accomplish with this, or something that like is difficult to put into words exactly,
Yeah.
because if you put it into words, then you would basically have done it already. Like
Hmm.
that is the job there, basically.
Yeah. The
um,
act of it is putting it into words that like make sense and resonate. And yeah, yeah.
yeah, and sort of like translating that concept that maybe you got from like an executive, or maybe that you have in your head, into the actual artifact that you're creating. I think about this a lot when it comes to AI as a tool for art, because obviously there's you type a prompt in a box and it gives you a picture. But I think even the people who are really into AI art hit the limits of that pretty quickly,
Yeah.
because they run out of the language that they have to make it be the thing that they want to be,
Hmm.
and end up being like, no, that the scarf is the wrong color. Make it slightly more green, or move it slightly to the left. And at that point, it's like, why are you telling the computer this in in human
Yeah.
language when you could just be picking a color or like moving it slightly to the left? But like that's not the interface that we have right now, right?
I feel like that also hits on the thing of like, it's like, oh, hey, guess what? If you like, you kind of need a specialized language. There's a lexicon to use to refer to artistry. If you're like, oh, the AI has spat out a picture for me, and the picture looks weird, but I can't tell you why the picture looks weird. It's like, well, guess who could probably tell you why that picture looks weird? Like
Hmm.
somebody who has spent years studying anatomy and color theory and like all of these different scientific bases of art type things that a lot of AI people like to poo poo on, being like, oh, well, what, that's
Yeah,
just silly. It's like, well, no, actually, like in the same way that a senior developer who has years of experience can kind of like form a mental picture of like what you want the code to achieve and the different, working pieces of like any kind of program that you're building. An artist does that when they approach a picture. And so if you have somebody with that expertise using AI as a tool, you are going to get the better output than if you just have somebody who has
yeah,
no idea what's going on.
yeah. Another way I think about it on the art side is like the number of choices that go into making
Mhm.
a piece of art,
Yeah.
um, and like what those choices are. And you can simplify out some of them. And I like to like
Mhm.
make the comparison to like digital art and Photoshop and stuff like that, where you have like brush tools or you have like
Yeah.
things like that that can do steps of it such that you don't have to like make every single pixel decision, or you can
Mhm.
shortcut things in some ways, like it'll automatically whatever do shading for you if you want to use Flip Studio or whatever, things like that.
Yeah.
And but there's still choices that you need to make that are more choices than can be made like typing out a prompt in one sentence.
Mhm.
Like that is not sufficient to encode the amount of choices that you need to make to create a piece of art.
Yeah. Mhm.
Um, and deciding which of those choices are important to be making yourself is also part of the process.
Mhm.
Because like maybe in this picture, I actually do want to do the shading myself because like the shading is really important and I don't want to delegate to that to an AI. And like, but this is just like this is a comic and I don't really care. And it just needs to have some shading in there to make it look more realistic, and that's fine. Like there's a lot of that kind of stuff where it's like AI can do parts of it, but we need to have a better way of defining what parts and being able to understand which ones are valuable in each
Mhm.
circumstance that I just like
Yeah.
think we're nowhere near being able to do right now.
Yeah, definitely. The people sure are flinging a lot of money at it.
Yes. So yeah, and overall takeaway on some of this AI productivity stuff is like AI can do some stuff. I don't think it's a complete sham or whatever. But I think
Mhm.
a lot of people are throwing money or throwing pilots at things that are not the right way to use it. And
Yeah.
I think to use it efficiently is going to require some kind of fundamental restructuring of workflows in a lot of places that many companies are not prepared to do, I think is the
Yeah.
biggest one there. I don't know if I'm prepared to do it. I don't know if anyone's prepared to do it. Yeah.
The Atlantic article definitely compared it to like electricity. You can't just be like, okay, use electricity now. We need to like fundamentally from the ground up
Hmm.
restructure how we are making factories, how we are making cities, how we like, how houses are built had to change when
Yes.
electricity came along. And I think that's where we're at with AI, is that we have to like basically like, yeah, restructure things from the ground up to make it actually a working and effective technology that people are able to leverage to benefit. So yeah, I feel like probably the startup space is where we'd see like some sort of like AI first, like, or AI ground up sort of like
Yeah.
initiative
And
come.
that's why I feel like I'm there basically work because that's because I mean that's what people are trying to do, right? Like, and
Mhm.
that's kind of what I'm doing is that you can physically like I could build a whole startup by myself. Sam Altman or whatever will talk about the one person, $1 billion company. And we're not there yet, but it is, I could see the outlines of how that could happen, basically, because
Mhm.
you just have to be able to be the delegator and know how to delegate to all of the AI systems that are doing all of
Mhm.
the other jobs for you. And as long as you have like the strategy on all of the levels that you need to have it, then you could theoretically do that. It's just how does any like that move
I
fast
feel like
break things? That breaks a whole bunch of existing processes and assumptions on how
yeah.
businesses work.
I feel like it also requires like almost like a Renaissance era level of like mastery of multiple different aspects of a business, because it's like you can't just
Yeah.
be like an expert in coding. You would then also need to be an expert at like a business use case and defining like what your
Yes.
market is. You would need to be an expert in
Yep.
marketing and like, and even like you would need to have like a high degree of competency in writing and art and the humanities and things like that so before
Yep.
you would be able to like
100%.
to intelligently inform the AI how to move in all of those different fields.
Yeah, I was talking with a acquaintance of mine about like what's the future of software engineering when AI happens, and he was suggesting that it would become less of a prestigious field. It would just be like a data entry type job where you get
Mm.
paid whatever, like 70K, and you make the AI do the code. And there's not really a career path there because there's so few of the upper level people who are actually needed anymore. And I don't think that's true because I don't think it makes sense to hire people for that job in that case.
Mhm.
Like, I think what you need is a combo PM engineer who
Mhm.
knows enough about the technical architecture side to be able to have the picture of what it should be in their head, but also knows what they're trying to accomplish from a business and
Yeah.
product perspective by doing it. Because like
Mhm.
that translation is the hard part now. Like generating the code is not the hard part. It's the translation of the product requirements and the product strategy into what
Mhm.
does the technical architecture look like. And then once you have that, the, you just hand the technical architecture to an AI and it happens.
Yeah.
So like, and that's not the step that a junior software engineer is going to be doing. So I think you just don't need those anymore, but you do need people who either engineers who understand product or product managers who are willing to adopt some amount of it, technical architecture
Mhm.
expertise. And
Yeah.
I do that. But as I've discovered in trying to do a real job hunt in the world that I haven't in many years because I was at Amazon for a long time and then ran my own startup, that's just not a job role that exists really. Like people don't
No.
expect you to be both a senior engineer and a person who cares about the product, which is unfortunate.
It's really unfortunate.
There's this standard of just like tossing it over the wall where the product manager writes their PRD, product requirement document, and then toss it over to the engineers who then looks at it and like, okay, I have to build a thing that does this, without understanding like what the actual customer problem they're trying to solve. And like the product manager doesn't understand what things are easier or harder to do, which is a big thing I think is useful in having that dialogue. Because if like the product manager is like, okay, what if we solve this problem for the customer? And the engineer's like, that's really hard. That would be a lot of work and complicated and really, really special case to this one particular scenario. What if we did this slightly different thing that is way easier and would mostly solve that problem and also a different other problem and also set us up such that we could solve similar problems later? Wouldn't that be better? Like, that is an incredibly useful thing to do.
Yeah.
um, that just does not exist in most companies' workflow right now. And I think
Yeah.
it has to exist more for AI. So,
Mhm. Agreed.
but yeah, to the point of like Renaissance person, I think and I'm not the first person to say this, there's going to be a lot more collapsing of job roles,
Mhm.
where like you have maybe you're a designer and an engineer, or you're a product manager and engineer, and like all of those become the same job because you only need a set of high level knowledge to be able to manage the AIs at it and not the deep knowledge. And there's probably still some role for the super deep things and like special cases, but I think
Yeah.
in most cases, having the one person with the broad high level knowledge and the ability to communicate well will
Mhm.
be what you need there.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So we were talking previously mostly about AI and coding and business use cases, but
Mhm.
it's also, as you might expect, impacting education a lot,
Mhm.
and especially humanities education, where a lot of what you're doing is writing essays. And there was
Mhm.
a great article recently that was everyone's cheating their way through school with ChatGPT. A lot of, especially humanities education, is go home and write a paper and bring it in and turn it in, and I will grade
Yeah.
it. um, People are using AI for that, to greater and lesser extents. Like some will just like chat GPT generate my essay and they will turn in essays that still say as a large language model, blah, blah, blah in them. Like that's one level of it. But there's also a level of like, okay, chat GPT generated an outline for me and then I wrote it. Or
Mhm.
I like talked to chat GPT to flesh out my thoughts for a while and then I wrote an essay. Or it wrote an essay and then I went in and edited it fairly substantially. Like
Mhm.
levels of that are taking away more or less work from the student and perhaps more or less learning from the student, and what does that look like? And there's a huge crisis about like what do you do about it, because people are going to do that and you can't really catch it. There's not really a police way to do it, which is what most
Mhm.
of the approach that people take right now is tell students that they can't use AI and try to catch it and discipline them if they do it. But
Yeah.
there's not a way to do that. There's a lot of cases where professors will report like, yeah, I'm pretty sure this was AI because it didn't sound like the student's voice at all, based on anything that they did like physically in class.
Mhm.
But I have no way to prove it, and I have like 10 of these, and I need to grade them by tomorrow. So like, what am I going to do about it? Like,
Yeah.
and there's definitely cases of people getting accused of having written an AI paper when it was not AI. It's really not clear what to do about it there. And there was this piece in the New Yorker a few months ago, called "Will the Humanities Survive Artificial Intelligence?" By D. Graham Burnett, who is a historian of science and technology at Princeton, basically talking about some of his experiences with AI in his classroom and what he thinks about the future of it as a person who is a historian. And Graham Burnett was also on the Hard Fork podcast a couple weeks ago,
Mhm.
which was super interesting to hear him talk also, and I recommend that a lot. The conclusion to the posed question in of the title of the article is obviously not clear. I think where he lands on
Mhm.
it, I'm this is my interpretation of it now, is they can, but probably not in colleges and universities as they currently exist.
Mhm.
It will have to be something radically different, and that may not happen in the existing education system that we have at all. Um, which is a pretty
Mhm.
radical take, and it was interesting to hear him talk very confidently about his interpretation of this because it was. I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot, obviously, too, about what this needs to look like going forward in the world where AI is a major part of everything that we do. And it is just kind of like, to some degree, surfacing issues that have been in our education system before AI.
Yeah.
Because it's like ChatGPT did not invent cheating on essays. And
Mhm.
the general push towards you need a college degree to get a job that makes any amount of money. And therefore, you just need to get through this degree and you do whatever you need to do that. Um,
Mhm.
has created incentives such that it's just like, well, why would I write this essay? Like, what is this essay getting me? Like,
Yeah.
because the like goal of whatever you're supposed to be learning by writing this essay is not what you're trying to get out of this, because what you're trying to get out of this is your degree that you can put on your resume and not really much else in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
So it has to some degree just brought that crisis to a head because it is now incredibly easy to cheat on your essay and not a lot of incentive to not cheat on your essay.
Yeah. I would probably add to that. It's also using the point of like all of our teachers are overworked and underpaid because
That
it's
too.
like, yeah, it's like if do you want the teachers to enforce, don't use AI? Well, then give them like, more time to review these things and engage with the students. Like, I don't know, it's like like the thing that comes to mind for me is like when we were growing up and the internet was a very new thing, and I remember very distinctly it was like, well, you can't use Wikipedia as a
Hmm.
reference for things. Fast forward to now, and Wikipedia is one of the more reliable sources of information on things in the
Yeah.
on the internet, and so it's like that changed really quickly because it's just like within like decades that kind of like perception of like the reliability of information on the internet changed. To our earlier point of like, hey, you need to like have this adaptable model of things. If AI is going to be a tool in, you know, a lot of future enterprises, is it maybe not a bad thing that kids are using AI to write their papers, but do we maybe just need to teach kids to how to use AI to write their papers? Like, how do you use AI to write a good paper? But also, like, the point of most humanities essays and things like that is furthering your critical understanding of the content that you are writing an essay on. I double majored in political science and cultural studies, so I was doing a lot of writing essays, and and a lot of the point of those was to make sure that I understood like the philosophical argument and it's like the thought process that was going into a lot of the different like books that I was reading. Like I took an entire class that was about Sigmund Freud. I have read so many I have read so
Yeah.
much Freud and it's like and it's like I wrote essays on Freud, and the point of it was so that I understood like the arguments that Freud was making about society in a lot of his different like works and things like that, and like how it related to the context of history that he was in, like how
Yeah.
relevant it is to today, how much of it has been refuted by more contemporary like philosophers and psychologists and things like that. And so AI is a tool, and is using the tool a bad thing? No. But like you need to make sure that you're still getting that objective,
Yeah.
the correct learning objective out of your use of the tool, which is like if you're just spatting in AI and having it regurgitate stuff out, that's not helping. And so that's why like when you're talking about like people being like, "Oh yeah, AI gave me the outline and I wrote the essay," or I talked over my thoughts with ChatGPT and then I wrote the essay. I'm like, you know what? Good on those kids. I think those are smart kids who are like gonna go far and know how to use the tools that are available
Hmm.
to them. But if the curriculum and if the way the class is structured is not such that a teacher can like guide them in using it in those appropriate fashions, then I think
Yeah.
yeah, it's a complicated situation.
Yeah. I have several points about that. So one is, yeah, I think there are ways to use AI usefully in the classroom, and
Hmm.
most teachers are just not equipped to do that because it requires basically just reinventing their entire curriculum to the point of
Yeah.
like rebuilding things from the ground up to make that work. The other is going back to what Graham Burnett talks about. Re, what are you trying to accomplish? What is your learning goal by writing this essay? Um, and then two things under that. One is the point of college to prepare you for the workforce and how you're going to use AI in the workforce? Or is the point of college to, like, especially in the humanities, develop you as a person and
Hmm.
build up your philosophical understanding of the world and your ability to interact with it? A more general personal development goal, basically, because those are different things. And
Yeah.
one of the things he mentioned on the Hard Work podcast is, especially in recent years, it has skewed much more towards that first thing. Like college should be preparing you for a job, and to the extent that it is not doing that, it is useless. And
Hmm.
as practically, that makes sense, especially when you're paying like 100K for this.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
need to get a return on that investment. Why would you pay 100K for an amorphous sense of personal development? Like that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah. I will say I didn't actually pay any money for my amorphous sense of self-development. I had a full ride.
Nice. Yes. But yeah, Casey Newton is like, there's many ways that you could spend 4 years on personal development that don't
Yeah.
require you spending tens of thousands of dollars and going to school for 4 years. So like
Right.
and so Graham Burnett, this is where it goes back to probably not in the colleges and universities as they currently exist, is like, it just has to be something different. Like that human development, personal development stuff needs to happen. Like that's still a valuable part of like the human experience that we should give people access to. Um, but how that happens and where is not really clear. And
Yeah.
in colleges and universities, if they radically reinvent themselves, like maybe, but he says that there's actually just going to be a new kind of school that comes up that does this thing more
Mm.
than there is colleges and universities revamping them, because he thinks it's a lot more likely, and I think this is probably true, that what people want out of college and university now is to prepare them for the job force. And rather
Yeah.
than reinventing the humanities, what they're more likely to do is go all the way towards the track that they've already been on, which is to be like, these humanities are actually kind of useless and we'll just throw them out and we'll focus only on the hard tech stuff or whatever is going to actually give you job skills for the workforce. Which is depressing, but
Like one depressing, two I think very inaccurate, because I would argue that there is actually a lot of like personal develop like yeah, like the woo woo personal development that like a lot of tech people like to shit on the humanities about a lot is actually very essential. It's like emotional intelligence
yes.
is a sign of like a successful, you know, like a successful organization has people with good emotional intelligence. I would really strongly argue, to our point earlier of like you kind of need these like product manager savvy engineers who can understand the business case but also understand the code base. It's like you're going to need people who know how to critically think and who know how to like critically read and analyze and like relate to people cross culturally, and that's something that the humanities do. I would argue that that piece of like this is a school that is purely for preparing you for the job market. There's a place for humanities in that school, and I would argue there needs to be a place for humanities in that school, because I think if you don't train people in that like aspect of empathy and critical thinking and emotional
Yeah,
intelligence, you're not preparing them for success. You are just creating this like weird misanthropic society of like people who only complete tasks.
that's essential. I also don't know if college is the right place to that. Maybe we just have
Yeah.
mandatory how to be a human school that everyone has to go to. um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think some of the points that you said, the other sort of like very radical thing that Graham Burnett said on the Hard Work podcast that I thought about a lot is that he thinks literacy in the sense of like long form text consumption is just on the way out, period.
Mm.
Um, there's just not going to be any more sit down and read a book and write an essay about it, because that is not a way that people interact with the world anymore, and that instead you can do more interactive things with it, like maybe you like get some segment of this book and you interpret it in some way, you discuss it, or like you perform it, or like there are many
Mm.
other ways that you could get that same sort of understanding and analysis out of it that are not sit down, read a whole bunch of text, and then produce a whole bunch of text, because AI can do that part. And one of the examples that he gave was he basically dumped 900 pages of extremely dense text for one of his courses into Notebook LM and told it to make a podcast out of it, basically talking about the key points and interpreting it and stuff like that, and listened to it while he was doing dishes, this AI podcast about his course. And
Mhm.
he thought it was actually really insightful, and it was actually getting to all of the key points and also making some good jokes along the way, which of this extremely dense 900-page text that like people have to work their way through. So it's just like AI
Mhm.
can help a lot with that in those parts of it in ways. And that means that those are just like not things that people need to be doing, question mark. I don't know how much that's like like
Yeah.
there's a level of that that I believe, and a level of that that is scary to me, and I don't know what the right level is. The other thing that he said along these lines is that writing an essay for school in the mockery of what a professor would do is like sit down and write an essay on Shakespeare. It's like the paper that I would write on Shakespeare, only there's more of them and they're worse. That's the practice that you're doing. And it's like, is that useful for anyone? Does anyone want to read those? Does anyone need to read those? You could just have AI do that. We could have so many essays on Hamlet or Freud or whatever. Like, we could have as many essays
Yeah.
on Freud as we want. Does anyone want to read essays on Freud? Like,
I
five.
mean, some people do.
Well, we can generate all of those that we want from with AI.
Yeah. It does kind of like bring me to like it creates like an interesting question in my mind. It makes me very curious as to like what is the origin of academic essay writing at an undergraduate
I'm sure this guy
level.
knows because he quoted it only existing for like 80 or 90 years or so.
Yeah, I was gonna say like that would seem like my estimates. Like it's been around for less than a century, and so it very well could die off just as
Yeah,
quickly.
and he's a historian about of science and
Yeah,
technology, and does a bunch of like the history of this stuff. And he also talked
yeah,
about like schools
mhm,
being taught in the vernacular for the common people was like a big transformation at the time. And like
mhm,
what school is transforms pretty dramatically over relatively short periods of time.
yeah, yeah.
And his opinion was this is going to be one of those like sea change
Dramatic
transformations and
transformations.
what it
Yeah,
is. Yeah.
I fondly reminisce in grade school we would always have a day in our grade school curriculum where we would go to the old Cahill school, which was basically a recreation of an old pioneer school in Minneapolis. And so what we would do is we would have like a full school day that was at this like recreation old pioneer school where it was like all the classes would have been in the same room and it was just like one teacher and a blackboard kind of thing. And when you think about it, how far divided are we from that? Not very in the span of human history. It makes perfect sense for that to have an evolution and for it to evolve as quickly as like we're probably seeing it. But yeah, like in the argument of like you're not going to have read really long things. I would push back on that just a little bit is like there is enjoyment in reading things. It's like people don't read things purely for academic reasons, you know? I think people will still enjoy reading books even though modern
Yeah.
attention spans wane and what have you. But it's like the same reason I
Yeah.
feel like people still enjoy going to plays. People still enjoy like listening to music. It's like those are things that are pretty like people enjoy telling stories. And that's stuff that's been true of humanity since the beginning.
Yeah. The interaction mode might be different though. One of the other things that he
Yeah.
said on the Hard Work podcast is that that's why it's a podcast, and that's why this is a podcast, is that it's actually much easier to just talk about things than
Yeah.
write them down and then force people to read them. They're
Mhm.
still consuming the content. I have definitely listened to way more audiobooks in the last few years than I have read physical books. Just like have not sat down and just like read a book in a long time. And I say that as someone who I tell this story often. We in like 5th grade, we had a read around America thing where basically for every page you read and then turned into like a little half sheet book report on, you got to proceed that many miles on this track around the map of America. And I lapped everyone in my class twice on this map of America. So, so
Yeah.
I was a big reader, and so it's
Mhm.
not that I'm not about reading books, but I haven't done it at all recently. So I definitely viscerally
Mhm.
feel like the difference between
Yeah.
how the modern world interacts with books.
Yeah, yeah. And I suppose I'm here to be your counterpoint because yeah, a friend recently gifted me the entire Vorkosigan saga, and I have read like admittedly not physical books. I'm reading on my Kindle, so it's like yeah, it's
Mhm.
different than how I would have done it as a child. But I have plowed through like 10 books in the past like 2 months. I don't think that it'll ever go away. I do agree that it's going to have a format change. I do agree that it might like look differently than how it does now, but I think and I think, but yeah, like to the point of like education evolving, like when we think about what is the intention of education, I don't think humanities are going to go away. I think that they still have a really important role to play in informing us how to relate to each other as people, if nothing else, because
Yeah.
it's like there's always going to be people.
Yeah. It's maybe a good segue to the other thing about Graham Burnett's thing that I wanted to
Mhm.
talk about, which is a thing that he did in his actual classroom with AI. So one of the things
Mhm.
that he did as an experiment was basically tell his students to have a conversation with a chatbot about the history of attention, which is what the class was about,
Mhm.
and then take basically that chat transcript and edit it down to 4 pages and add some notes and turn it into to him basically.
Hmm.
And he said that like reading these chat transcript essays on his couch was one of the more profound experiences of his teaching life. Like he's been doing
Mhm.
it for 30 years and has read many, many, many student essays, but like he felt like he was seeing something really interesting in these essays. And so in the piece, he has a bunch of anecdotes and he goes into a little bit more depth on one of them on the podcast as well. And there's just like a lot of interesting stuff in there about like how people are interacting with like their own knowledge and thoughts while talking to the AI. And like software engineering is a very different thing, but in software engineering there's a concept of rubber ducking, which I don't know if you've heard about,
I have
which
not,
is
no.
you have a rubber duck on your desk, and when you have encountered a problem you turn to the rubber duck and you start explaining the problem to the rubber duck. And just because it's there to talk to, and in the process of trying to explain it out loud, like you
Yeah,
often
you'll
solve the
figure it
problem for
out.
yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So like even if the AI is not offering anything to the problem solving process, which I don't think is true, I think it has things to offer there. Just like having something to talk to and reflect your thoughts back
Hmm.
to you in like a narrative way can be
Yeah,
useful. And a lot of people have like saw that in these conversations and also like
yeah,
had some real insights from the AI in some cases and stuff like that.
yeah.
Um,
I feel like that's almost like not even unique to like yeah like rubber ducking. It's like I haven't heard the phrase before, but like when you think about like performing arts or writing or anything like that, it's like yeah sometimes it's like you will just talk to a person and it will clarify your thoughts, and that's like a non-unique thing to that field. And so I do think like using AI
yeah. So
is a useful
it's
part for
there's
that.
maybe some interesting question there around like writing is
Hmm.
also a way to clarify your thoughts. Like we were wrote at Amazon, and Amazon was big at writing 6 pagers.
Oh yeah, yeah. I wrote so much.
The process of sitting down and writing all of your thoughts out in text is a
Hmm.
great way to make sure that your thoughts are clear because you have to be able to communicate them in that
Yeah.
way.
Hmm.
Um, and similarly, you can do that in a conversation, and the mode is just slightly different.
Yeah.
And maybe it's serving slightly different purposes. I think there's some interesting questions there about like the difference between the functions that those serve. And AI is just there always, so you don't actually need to do another person there
Right.
for it. You can just work it through that way. And is that do you get more like Socratic learning out of that by just like having people talk to the AI? You don't need a
Eh,
professor who is there to talk individually to the students for 5 hours a week for every single student, which is too many hours. Like
yeah.
they just have an AI that can do that. And like,
That is Socratic. The Socratic method is
yeah.
asking questions and having people think about it. So
Yeah.
fascinating.
The other specific anecdote that I thought was really interesting in all of that is he talked about a female student in particular who came to his office hours to talk about some
Hmm.
things that she felt while doing this activity. Um, and one of the things that she felt was that she could like be more in her own head than she has ever been before in the
Mm.
course of this conversation with the AI because she wasn't worried about it.
Yeah.
And the professor points out that especially female students, but a lot of students in general, are very aware of their audience when they're talking to
Hmm.
someone. And they're trying to not intimidate them, and they're trying to make sure they're coming along, and they're trying to make sure that they're not reacting badly to it. And you just don't need to do any of that when you're talking to a chatbot because the
Yeah.
chatbot doesn't care. And
It's true.
does that like release your limiters to some extent and allow you to more fully
Hmm.
have your own thoughts when you're not worried about the person that you're talking to, um, which she
Yeah.
felt she could, and I think is a really interesting
I feel like that would be a very
perspective.
interesting that'd be something interesting to see if there like, somebody does a study on that, like not just for female students, but also I imagine like different marginalized groups as well, because yeah, there is that filtering action that always happens like in an educational space where it's like, oh no, I can't speak up because it's like I don't have the confidence of a straight white man to speak up about things that I know
Hmm.
nothing about, and so it's like yeah,
Yes.
like removing that so like potential for societal stigma and having it just be like this almost like intimate thing. I think yeah, it could be
Hmm.
very useful for a lot of different students in those groups.
Yeah. The other thing I was thinking about that is that in a lot of ways it is the flip side of the chatbots are too sycophantic thing, which is
Yeah.
it is just validating you always, which is like it's not quite the same thing because it wasn't that it was validating her always, and it did challenge these students on some things at sometimes. So it wasn't just like echoing back,
Hmm.
yes, you're right about everything all the time,
Yeah.
but the lack of filter and the lack of having to worry about it
Yeah.
was something on its own, which is interesting too.
Yeah.
But that also goes back to you have to learn how to interact with people and
Yep.
the role play conversations that we were having a couple weeks ago, which is this is not talking to a person. And if
No.
people are learning their interactive skills only with a chatbot that they don't have to care about, you do have to care about people sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's like it
there's
can be part of an education, but let us not have it be the only part. You do need to like actually interact with real people.
yeah, yeah. So again, I think that's super interesting because like you can see how this could be uniquely helpful in a lot of ways
Hmm.
and uniquely interesting way to interact with things, but also it doesn't replace a lot of things directly for sure. And
Hmm.
I think like the shape of the systems that we have are not such that it is easy to just put it in the place that it
Yeah.
goes,
Yeah.
if that makes
Agreed.
sense.
Yep.
Because and it's not even clear what the place that it goes is exactly. Another thing that I think about a lot is as a person who uses AI daily and has again for like the last 9 months or so, and also a lot of people, even some of the people who work at these big AI companies, will often be surprised by either
Hmm.
something that it's surprisingly good at or is able to do that I wouldn't have expected, or something that it's surprisingly bad at. Like either both, like it's confusing and not intuitive in a lot
Hmm.
of cases what it can or can't do. So there's that part of it too, which is just like so this thing has a whole bunch of capabilities and it has a way to offer a lot of value to us in our society clearly in ways, but we don't know exactly what those ways are. And also, we don't have places in our existing systems to put it such that it can only do those things and not replace other valuable things that it can't do. Um,
Hmm.
and how do we, I guess, completely remake society so it can do that? I don't know. Is that the right solution?
Seems like it might be what's happening regardless. So
Yeah. So yeah,
we'll see.
that's that. I put this one at the end so that when we got to, I guess we need to remake society, that would be the end of the podcast, not the
Yeah,
middle of
yeah.
the
Good.
podcast.
What a note to end on. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think there's gonna be a lot of stuff to continue to talk about, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Fast and Broken podcast. I'm Carly Rector. If you'd like to support my work, you can subscribe to my newsletter at carlyrector.substack.com.
And I've been Teresa Kramer. If you would like my voice on your products, you can visit my website at teresakramer.com.
And if you enjoyed this podcast, leave us a review. It lets people know we're listening and it helps more people find the podcast. See you next week.
Bye.